And good morning, and here it is. Almost exactly, well, actually, it is exactly 11 o'clock. And you're probably saying, Cassie, why is it taking you so long to get this video out? Well, there's a good reason for that. I just got back from breakfast about 15 minutes ago. I was over in Camp Hill at the Cornerstone Coffee House, and I was having breakfast with a person I met on Instagram, and we were discussing a lot of shit. Just having fun. We actually met around 8 a.m. and we chatted until about 10:30, and then I came home and used the bathroom and got a little water. And then finally decided to get into videotaping, and I'm going to do my videotaping, and then I'm going to go out and get lunch at a relatively cheap place, but I'm going to stop by and drop off a flyer for our recruitment night next Tuesday. This coming Tuesday evening, we have our first recruitment night of the year. Yay. My second recruitment night that I get to go through, where I'm not being recruited, I'm one of the recruiters, and I get to help somebody out, I hope. Teach them how to skate. Yeah. But yesterday I drove all over. I was out for about 3 hours passing out, putting out flyers, putting them up in stores and the post office and at different places, locales around. And this last place, I want to put a flyer up, get it up, and have a cider, and then go get something to eat. That should be fun. It'll be interesting. And then tomorrow I'm gonna go skating. Monday I have practice. Tuesday I have recruitment night. Wednesday I have practice. So my week is busy. And then I'll probably take Thursday off. I'm not allowed to scrimmage with the York team because I'm not certified. And I was told by their coach that I need more work before I can scrimmage with them. So I've actually been going to the gym. I went to the gym twice this week. I went to Planet Fitness. You can't really call it a gym, but I went to Planet Fitness twice this week. And I went Tuesday night and I went last night, and I worked on legs. Strengthening my legs so that I can skate faster and do crossovers. I have really been busting my butt, to be quite honest. I have been kicking it pretty hard now, and I've been kicking it either skating on Sundays, which I'm going to do tomorrow again. I go for 2.5 hours, just skate and work on my form and work on my speed and stuff like that. So I'm really kind of pushing it extra hard, trying to certify, which I still want to do because I want to play in a bout at the end of February, and I want to play in a bout in the middle of March. So I'm pushing hard to get to those certification points. I'm doing my best. I'm working on it. But what about writing? Glad you asked. The 3 days I had of writing, where I was really just like churning out a few thousand words, I haven't been able to do that since then. Just so much going on. And I've been kind of vegging out. Wednesday night was not a good night for me. I had a bad night of practice, so Thursday night I kind of just like vegetated. And I've discovered that when my mood is bad, I can't really sit down and write anymore. I used to be able to. I used to work through that. Actually, I'd sit at the keyboard for about 2 hours and maybe peck out 500 words. I'm finding now I just need to disconnect, and I've actually been completely disconnecting from social media during that time. Usually watching TV, and when I mean watching TV, I'm usually like watching a movie or watching a TV series. I'm once again going through Breaking Bad, one of my favorite TV shows of all time. I think this is like the 5th time I've binged it in 2 years, because I just can't get enough of it. And that's what I've been going through again. I mean, I've been watching like 2-3 episodes a night. I've been going to bed around midnight, and I've actually been catching up on a lot of sleep. This last week, I've been getting up at like 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning. Sometimes after laying in bed for like about an hour, I'll just wake up and I'll realize it's 9 o'clock. Wow, I never used to do that. Today was the earliest I've been up since I've had to go to work. I actually got up at 6:45 so that I could get over to the coffee house at 8 a.m. And we both commented that it was early for early for us. It never used to be that early for me. I'd usually be up like 6:30, 7 o'clock on Saturdays, and then I'd be up at 7 o'clock on Sunday so I could go down to Little Amps. I haven't been down to Little Amps to write for 2 weeks now because I've been getting up at like 8:30 and I just don't feel like going down there. Yeah. But one of the things that's been, I guess you could say, perplexing me, and one of the things that's been going through my mind of late, is something that a friend of mine who I met on Second Life, who I may have mentioned. I've actually been going back into Second Life now and then, and running into some old friends. I haven't been back in about 3 or 4 days, simply because, no social media, I'm vegetating. But she helped me beta read Her Demonic Majesty back in 2011, going into 2012. And she liked the story a lot. And she asked me how my writing was going, because I hadn't actually seen her in about 2 years, about 2.5 years. And she asked me how my writing was going. And I told her that since the last time I had spoken with her, I'd been working on this novel series since 2013, which was really about the last time I saw her. So I had actually went like 4 years without seeing her. And I was working on this novel series, plus I had written several other novels, like 2 or 3 others since then. And I mentioned that one of the novel series I'd written was called Suggestive Amusements. And I said, it was an interesting story at the time I wrote it. And she said, when did you write that? And I said, well, I actually wrote that kind of like during the summer of 2012 when I was living in Indianapolis. And she asked if I'd ever considered publishing it. And I said I did, but the book would probably need a lot of polishing. And she said, you should probably consider rewriting it, because at this point, editing it would likely not do you any good. So she said, you should probably consider rewriting it. And I've actually considered that. I'd hate to stop what I'm working on right now, because I've got almost 1 million words into the Foundation Chronicles. But it's sort of becoming like a Winds of Winter exercise to me. George R.R. Martin's written like 2.5 million words or something like that for the whole Song of Ice and Fire series. And my belief is he's kind of burned out. He probably has been dragging out the Winds of Winter simply because he's finding it difficult to sit down and write about it. I mean, he has been writing. We know this because he's published excerpts But I think when it comes to actually closing the deal, his heart's just not in it anymore. And I know they keep saying that there's maybe going to be 2 more novels after The Winds of Winter. If there are, I don't believe he's going to write them. I believe he's probably going to do a Dan Patterson and hand them off to somebody else to write. He probably has all these notes for the entire series, because we do know, as it was famously reported, that he sat down with the producers of Game of Thrones and basically told them the whole story. After they got to the end of season 6, which brought the TV series up to where the book series had ended. And they went into season 7 and they were like, okay, where do we go from here? And George sat down with them, I guess over a long lunch, it was said, and told them the entire story, what was going to happen from that point on. That's because George R.R. Martin is one of these meticulous planners. He has this huge, gigantic world that he's been living in for, 20 years. And he has all these notes, and he's already figured out all this shit that's going to happen. So he knows how all the characters are going to fare. And I don't happen to believe that it's going to be... they'll all be in a graveyard with, 1,000 pages of snow and wind blowing over them. Which is how he joked the last book of Song of Ice and Fire series was going to end. It was just going to be 1,000 pages of describing the graveyard where everybody is buried and how, snow and wind is constantly blowing over their graves. So, I think he's kind of tired of the series. And I'm kind of getting to that point too. I want to finish it, but man, with everything else that's going on in my life, it's becoming a chore. I mean, it really is. Like, do I want to sit down and write 500 words about Annie and Carrie? I would love to. But at the same time, I don't want to. I want to actually, do something else. So I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm kind of in a quandary right now. I really should continue with the series because right now the Sea Level novel is going to get into some interesting areas. I mean, really interesting areas. And I want to write about that, but at the same time, I'm sort of like, wow. I'd really like to get involved in publishing something else. And the biggest problem you have right now, the biggest problem I have, you don't have any of these problems. I do. The biggest problem I have is if I decide I'm going to publish something, I literally have to stop whatever it is I'm working on and spend spend time either editing or rewriting. Because let's face it, my first drafts do need some editing. I go back and look over some of these old excerpts and I was like, oh my god, yeah. Misspelled words and stuff like that. And that's the quandary I've always run into, is if I want to start working on a book, if I want to publish something, like let's say I want to go back and work on the A-level novel and I want to publish it. And I've always said the thing I really need to do is publish it as 3 separate novels because it's so huge no one's going to buy it by itself. So you want to publish Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3 separately. But that means going through Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3 separately and editing it. I mean, really sitting down and editing the manuscripts. And that's going to take time. That's going to take months. I would imagine, just to go through each act, you're probably looking at a couple of months of work to get everything edited properly for each act. So there's 6 months out of your life. Forget it. You're not going to be able to work on new material while you're doing the editing. So realistically speaking, if I decided to go back and edit the first and second novel of the Foundation series and publish them, I'm not going to be able to work on anything new for about a year. And this is the quandary you run into is, well, do I want to stop what I'm working on right now and go and edit on the offhand chance that in 6 months' time, I'll have the entire book out there ready to go? Probably not. But I do know that there are some people who would be like, woo, we'd like to see this, And maybe just throw together a cheap-ass cover and put it out there and hope for the best. I don't know. I really don't know. I'm torn. I'm also torn that do I want to publish a couple of my older novels? The two that I would actually consider publishing is Suggestive Amusements, which is a standalone. There's nothing else there. And that was a short novel. I think that was like 71,000 words, 72,000 words, somewhere around there. It wasn't a big one. And the other one is Colorijo, which was actually the sequel to Kuntilanik. And I wrote that during NaNoWriMo 2012. Actually, Her Demonic Majesty was written during NaNoWriMo 2011. Colorijo was written during NaNoWriMo 2012. And the Foundation Chronicles, A for Advanced, actually started with NaNoWriMo 2013. And I nearly finished the novel up during NaNoWriMo 2014. I actually ended up adding 135,000 words were written during those 2 months. That was one of the reasons why I was able to get that book done, all 425,000 words of it. I was able to get it done in like under 500 days. Is because in 2 months' time I wrote 135,000 words. And those were the last two NaNoWriMos I participated in. Simply because, once again, real life got in the way and I just could not participate in the NaNoWriMo. But Colorijo was the sequel of sorts to Kuntilanik, which was the first thing I ever self-published, which was a 25,000 word novella. And I turned that into a novel, and it was, again, for me, it was relatively short. I think that was 74,000 words. I'd have to look it up. But Colorijo brought together my characters from Kuntilanik, Indiri and Buwan. Indiri was a Indonesian Muslim parapsychologist, and Buwan was a Bali natural healer. And they were both delving into the supernatural of Indonesia. And if you ever want a locale that is rich in supernatural lore, Indonesia is it. Actually, that whole area, Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines, probably Vietnam, China, Japan, Korea, that whole area has supernatural coming out the butt. And Indonesia especially, because everything there is haunted. There are spirits everywhere. There are evil things everywhere. There are sea creatures that live off the coast that are going to devour you. There's the Queen of the Sea in Indonesia, where if you're caught walking along the beach wearing green, that's her color. So she will come out of the water and drag you down to your death. And there's actually a hotel somewhere on Java Island that has a room set aside for the Queen of the Sea. Now, it's my understanding the hotel has become kind of run down, and it's not quite as opulent and as amazing as it used to be, which tends to be the case for a lot of that stuff that was built back in the 60s and 70s, and just hasn't kept up with modern times. I ran into that a little bit in China. Stuff that when they first built it was considered 5-star hotels. Nowadays they're like 1 star, because now they finally opened up the mainland to all the big chains and everything else, and all those little hotels got pushed out of the way. The place I used to stay at, the Nanhai, when it was first built, it was actually one of the first hotels in the Shenzhen SEZ that catered to Westerners, and it was considered a 5-star hotel. I think it's like a 2-star at the best these days, and I don't know, it may not even be in business anymore. I know you can see it on Google Maps, but every time I look at it, it looks as if the modern era is encroaching upon it, and they've put in all this landfill off the hotel where there used to be the bay. And that was one of the great things about staying there, was if you got a room overlooking the deep bay, it was a great morning thing, and you could go out and walk the grounds, and there was the ocean more or less to your left or to your right. Now it's all landfill, so I don't even know if the hotel's even in business anymore, and that's the way this place is in Indonesia. But I digress once again. I had Kuntilanak and Kolorijo were actually going to anchor what at that time I had figured out was going to be a series of supernatural novels taking place in Indonesia. And I had them all plotted out. Well, not plotted out, but I knew what they were about. I knew where they were going to take place. I knew they were going to get weird. Because there's so many places in Indonesia that deal with ghosts and what have you. And then I got sidetracked. There's that word again. I got sidetracked by the Foundation Chronicles. And the reason I got sidetracked by the Foundation Chronicles was because of the real Annie. We know who she is. And I think I've told this story before. Back in 2012, she kept at me to write a story around the role-playing characters that we created, Annie and Carrie. I created Carrie, she created Annie. And one of the things she kept telling me was, you really need to bring their story to life. You really need to tell their story, because there's a lot of stuff there that's interesting. And at the time, I kept trying to convince her to write the story with me, because the biggest concern I had, and I let her know this several times, was I don't think I can capture Annie, not the way you played her. And that was true, because when I showed her first draft of the first few chapters of Act 1 of A for Advanced, she kind of lost her shit on me. And she was right in saying this, that I had turned Annie into a background character, that Carrie ended up becoming the driving force behind the relationship. And, she got pretty irate with me, but I had to agree with her. Because when it came right down to it, I went back and reread it, and I remembered how I played Carrie It was like, yeah, you're right. Annie was the driving force in that relationship. Annie was the world traveler. Annie did visit all these different places. Annie was the witch who understood magic. And it ended up sounding in the first draft like Carrie was the one who knew all this stuff, and Annie just went along with him because she wanted to be with him, which wasn't the case. She wanted to be with him, but on her own terms. So I had to actually go back, and you probably remember this because I blogged about it, and I spent a month rewriting some of these scenes so that she developed into the character that she is today. And one of the reasons why I actually started writing the Foundation Chronicles is I held off on it the longest time, hoping the real Annie would help me write. And I finally had an author friend of mine, and I might as well give props here. I know I've got her name someplace. Where is she? Where are you? Where are you? I know you're here. Hold on. I will get this. Wow. Just what I want. Somebody's name. That's not the end. Dana Ellington. Dana Ellington, who is a writer friend from Atlanta, Georgia, and who has some marvelous works of her own. Look her up, Dana Ellington. You will find her. We met in May of 2014 in Silver Springs, Maryland. She was there for the week doing some work, and we met for dinner. And she finally said, we talked about the situation, and she told me, look, you can't wait for this person forever. If you want to tell this story, make the character your own. You know, it sounds like you've already done that. You've already started to make the character your own. So that's what you need to do. She said, just go ahead, make the character your own, and, you know, be done with it. She goes, if your friend isn't going to help you write this, and you can't keep putting it off. If you want to write the story, write it. And keep in mind, once you start writing this story, the characters are yours anyway. So that actually convinced me to start putting something together. And it was one of the reasons why when I did Camp Nano in July of 2014, I wrote The Scouring to sort of get the feel for Salem. And that ended up becoming a novel in itself. It was 55,000 words. Short novel, but a novel in itself. And then I launched into A for Advanced after I did stuff like drew the layout of the entire school and all this other stuff. And I actually have had the real Annie compliment me and say, while the current Annie in the story is not quite how she played the character, she can see how Annie is now my creation, and that she's happy with Annie. You know, she's happy with how Annie turned out, because Annie, that's the one thing we kind of ran into, is that we only took the role play so far, and we never saw what happened after Annie got older. You know, in fact, we didn't even see what happened in terms of the actual role play. We only covered a couple of months. We really only covered a few months of what would be covered in the novel. And I would have had to figure out how to age Annie up anyway. You know, how to develop her as a character. So I have been told that, yes, while she's not like the girl I played in that role play, she is your character, and she's good. You know, I don't have any problems with Annie. She is probably not how I would have played her, I would have maybe done her differently, but, you know, she's still a strong, independent girl on her own. And she's okay with that, which I'm happy with. Yeah, I got distracted from my Indonesian supernatural series by a supernatural series about young witches in love, on the verge of having sex. To hear some people say, I don't know how they resist each other. Yeah, it is. Yeah, these two kids. If it wasn't for that dang 3 bindings thing, yeah, that virginity would be. Let's just face it. They probably would have lost that at 13. Yeah, I'm not under any illusions. Those kids, yeah. Those kids, they would have lost that virginity. Big time. Yeah. They would have lost that virginity big time by now. But those 3 bindings are keeping that at bay. Although we now know, based on Girl Carrie's sex test, they are definitely sexually active. Oh boy, are they sexually active. Yeah, they are. They're not doing intercourse, but that's not keeping them from doing anything else. So yeah, they're a sexually active teen couple, and they're not ashamed of it. At least they're not. We don't know. They're probably not ashamed of it now. I mean, once it's all out in the open, it's like, okay, you got us. We've been doing stuff. And Coraline's like, yeah, you and about 95% of the rest of the school. Yeah, you and about 95% of the rest of the kids in the school, too. Yeah, everybody's doing stuff. And things. That's what you call it nowadays, yeah. That is the thing. That's the one thing I do like. You had all these burgeoning witches and wizards at Hogwarts, and it never seemed as if you had to worry that someone was going to turn up pregnant at some point. You know, I guess maybe in the 90s, all these kids were awkward as hell. And just didn't have time for sex. But, you know, I'm looking at some of those houses. Damn sure Slytherin. Man, come on. You cannot tell me the kids in Slytherin were not sexually active. Please. You cannot tell me that the kids in Slytherin were not sexually active. They had to be. But, you know, J.K. didn't want to write about that, so. That was left for all the fan fiction that came out later. Oh, you know. That was the thing. And I remember there were even some fan-made videos that were done a few years after the series ended. And it was, what were the kids like 10 years after, 10 years after, you know, the events in the last book, or even a few years after. And I remember there was one where Hermione came over to visit Harry, and Harry was not with Ginny. I don't know what happened there. But the gist of the story was Hermione was finally realizing that marrying Ron was like the biggest mistake in her life. And I think the video ended with her and Harry waking up in bed the next morning, and Harry's like, "Oh shit," and she's like, "What do you mean? This is something we should have done 10 years ago." Which is what all the shippers say. And I think even J.K. Rowling has been on record as saying, yeah, Harry and Hermione should have ended up together. Because, simply put, when she starts analyzing it, Ron and Hermione getting together and getting married and having kids just did not make sense. So, yeah, you leave that to the fan fiction, you leave that to the shippers. And at least with me, I'm coming out and saying, yes, my kids are sexually active at the age of 13. Deal with it. So whenever anyone's writing fan fiction, it's like, damn. I guess we're going to have to write about something weird here. Annie the Dominatrix. They'll probably be shipping, it'll probably be The Adventures of Annie the Dominatrix Witch, and how she kidnaps Emma and hauls her off to some hidden location in one of the tunnels under the school and teaches that little bitch a lesson that she'll never forget. Down on your knees, bitch. Yes, mistress. And now somebody will be doing fan fiction. I'll go, damn, that's what I wanted to do. Yes. See, I used to do fan fiction. That's the thing. I did fan fiction, so I know how these people think. Yes, I used to do fan fiction. Not a lot. And I never really published any of it, but yeah, I did my share of fan fiction. Yeah. I did my fair share of fan fiction. And a lot of people might say that Foundation Chronicles arose out of fan fiction for Harry Potter, because that was what it was originally based out of the Harry Potter world. And then I just turned it into my own world. Sort of like how 50 Shades of Grey was originally Twilight fan fiction, and what was it? Their Mortal Devices was originally Harry Potter fan fiction, told from the point of view of Draco Malfoy and how he saw his life within Hogwarts, and turned it into, I think it was, yeah, Mortal Devices. I have to look that up, but yes, that was fan fiction. That was Harry Potter fan fiction turned into a novel. And yes, we know 50 Shades of Grey, it's world famous. It was Twilight fan fiction. Christian Grey and the Paperweight, whatever the fuck her name was, I can't remember, were originally Edward and Bella. Yeah. Which, really, how can you watch those movies and not see those two up on the screen? Really, it should be. There should be, someone should convince Kristen Stewart, and I can't remember who the hell played Edward now, to do a short fan film of 50 Shades of Grey, where they're actually reciting some of the lines. That would be hilarious, because they would totally take the piss on it. They would. Because the one guy, wow, I know I'm going to get lambasted for this, but I can't remember. Oh, the one who plays Cedric from Harry Potter, who plays Edward, and who hates the character so much that he has said, Edward is just like this huge, enormous scumbag. I hate him, but the money was good. Yeah, he would probably takes the piss on that character so bad. I love it. So anyway, so what's going to come next? I have no idea. We'll see. I got to get through this weekend. Laundry this afternoon. I do need to do laundry horribly bad. And going skating tomorrow because I got to work on shit. I do. Giggle, giggle, giggle. So we're coming up on 40 minutes of me just rambling about crap. So this is as good a time as any to stop. I hope you're having a good weekend. I hope everything goes well, and I will see you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.